All right, why don't we go ahead and start? Good afternoon, and welcome to our inaugural gathering highlighting faculty profiles in research, art, and innovation. I'm Cherry Williams. I'm the UCR Library's Director of Distinctive Collection, which some of you may know is also home to the renowned Eaton Collection of Science Fiction and Fantasy. Today, we will be in conversation with Professor John Jennings and Dr. Nalo Hopkinson. Today, we will be exploring Afrofuturist comics, Sankofa, and the Black Speculative Reimagination. Before we start, I have just a couple of housekeeping things. One is, please be aware that this is being recorded. And two, due to the large number of attendees, you are all muted. We will not be checking the hand raising, but we are going to be monitoring the chat. And we've saved time in particular for questions and answer that you'll be able to get answers to your questions after their talk. So it is now my great pleasure to introduce to you our panel discussions, Dr. Nalo Hopkinson and Professor John Jennings. Dr. Nalo Hopkinson, award-winning author of numerous novels and short stories, is a professor in UCR's Creative Writing Department and in the Science Fiction and Cultures of Science program. Professor Hopkinson writes science fiction and fantasy, which tries to be mindful of the deep diversity of human identity and experience. In 2018, she began her foray into writing comics when she was selected to be the author of House of Whispers, a monthly 22-page story for DC Comics in the world of author Neil Gaiman's Sandman. Professor Hopkinson is also a member of UC's Science Fiction Research Center. John Jennings is a professor of media and cultural studies at the University of California, Riverside. He is an interdisciplinary scholar who examines the visual culture of race in various media forms, including film, illustrated fiction, comics, and graphic novels. He is also the co-editor of the Eisner Award-winning collection, The Blacker the Ink, Constructions of the Black Identity in Comics and Sequential Art. Professor Jennings' current projects include the horror anthology Box of Bones, the coffee table book, Black Comics Returns with Damian Duffy, and the Eisner Award-winning, Bram Stoker Award-winning New York Times best-selling graphic novel adaptation of Octavia Butler's classic dark novel, Kindred. And finally, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you our moderator for today's panel, Professor Cheryl Vint. Professor Vint is a member of the Departments of Media and Culture Studies and English at the University of California, Riverside, where she directs the Speculative Fiction and Cultures of Science program. Her work focuses on reading speculative fiction as an everyday site of critical engagement of pressing social and justice political issues. In her most recent book, Biopolitical Futures in 21st Century Speculative Fiction, is forthcoming from Cambridge University Press. Professor Vint.
So I'm not muted, just checking that, sorry. So thank you. And I believe that we're first gonna have the presentations, right? And then I will do the moderating. So I'll just say, first of all, to the people, I have some questions that were submitted to me in advance, and then I'll be monitoring the chat as the presentations are given and during the discussion period. And I'll try to go one question from the pre-submitted ones, one from the chat. And I know we have many people here today, which is fantastic to see all this interest in speculative fiction and especially the work of my great colleagues, John and Nalo. So I'm undoubtedly not going to get to all of your questions. I apologize in advance, but we're so glad that all of you are here with us. So I will now turn things over.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's such an honor. So Nalo, we should have flipped a coin. Which one of us do you want us to? You want to start, or you want me to start?
You go first.
I knew it. I don't even know why. I don't know why.
That way you can be an example to me.
Oh, I feel tricked. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm gonna share a screen here. Oh yeah, by the way, I want to do a preface too. For some reason, to the audience, there's been like a little bit of, wait on the wait time for the parable book, and I'm not sure, but I'll try to fix that. So, just want to let you know that. All right, so we're gonna start here.
We should tell them, John, that we are reading each other's stories.
Oh yeah, by the way, we're reading each other's stories. Thank you, Nalo, for saying that. I did not mention that. Thank you. I'm actually reading from Comicsology too, so I'm going to go into like guided view. Right across the pond, which is out of context. New Orleans, Louisiana. Latoya, Maggie, stop, darling. What? We were about to tell you guys anyway. Like I didn't know. You knew Lumi and you didn't tell me? It's their business. Oh, Habibi, don't say you're mad at me. I brought you both presents. Latoya said you'd like these. Trying to buy our love already, huh? Cool. It's ugly. Don't be rude, Habibi. It can be your lucky charm, okay? I don't want it. Habibi. Plop. Bloop. I do thank you, fine lady. Erzuli. Pretty fine yourself, stranger. None too smart, though. Going for a swim encumbered like that. I should have known better than to grab for shiny, pretty things. Now I'm all entangled in those girls' story. You sure about that? You're the one the chain trapped, but I'm the one that got you free. Seems to me I'm the one that gets to partake of their story now. Fair is fair. Your catch, your prize. Anyway, you're probably a better deity for them than I am. Uncle Monday, at your service. Oh my, so what's that under that hat? I've heard tell of you, Alligator King. Will you come over to the house someday and tell me your story? Surely will, and be my honor. But now I'm back to catching fish for my youngins. Of course they're mine. Women, girls, and the stories of all their lives, all mine to care for. Gotta feed our babies soon, or they'll eat each other. The missus wouldn't like that. No, she wouldn't. Latoya, you don't really like Maggie. You're just trying to be like Dad. You got it wrong, sis. I date girls, and Dad dates guys. That's not what She's mad. This doesn't mean you're my sister now, You don't get to tell me what to do. Wouldn't dream of it, baby. Dreams and guides and whispers, sure. But this ain't the story I was sent for. Guess it's time to move on. Hey, when you get to your place, let me know. Let me show you this weird book I found. I've been trying to figure it out. And my story is always in tears. All right. So I'm gonna dip out of this, stop share. And let's see, let me share screen again, and we will go to Parable of the Sower. And again, I will fix anything here that jumps off to full screen. Everybody can see this?
There. So, the beginning of Parable of the Sower, 2024. Prodigy is, at its essence, adaptability and persistent positive obsession. Without persistence, what remains is an enthusiasm of the moment. Without adaptability, what remains may be channeled into destructive fanaticism. Without positive obsession, there's nothing at all. Earthseed, The Books of the Living by Lauren Boya Olamina. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Earthseed, the Books of the Living. Me at 7 years old. Saturday, July 20, 2024. I had my recurring dream last night. I guess I should have expected it. It comes to me when I struggle, when I try to be my father's daughter. Prefiero tener las estrellas. I should say I don't speak much Spanish, so forgive me. My stepmother, Corazon Olamina, las estrellas son gratis. Prefiero tener las luces de la ciudad de vuelta. So last night, I dreamed a reminder that it's all a lie. A gift of God may sear unready fingers. Earthseed, the Books of the Living. Sunday, July 21, 2024. At least 3 years ago, my father's God stopped being my God. And yet, today, because I'm a coward, I let my father baptize me in all 3 names of that God who isn't mine anymore. My God has another name. Yesterday was our birthday, my 15th and my father's 55th. This morning, we got up early to go across town to church. Here we see Keith, Marcus, Dad. Dad's a Baptist minister. Most Sundays, he holds services in our front rooms. Not all of the people living within our neighborhood walls are Baptists, but those who need to go to church are glad to come to us. That way, they don't have to go outside. It's bad enough that some people, my father for one, have to go out to work at least once a week. None of us goes out to school anymore. Adults get nervous about kids going outside. But today was special. My father made arrangements with his friend Reverend Robinson, who still has a real church building with a real baptistry. We see some more of the characters. Edwin Dunn is one of them. We see Hector Quintanilla, Drew Balter, and Sylvia Dunn. The alternative was to be baptized in the bathtub at home. That would have been cheaper and safer and fine with me. I said so, but no one paid any attention. We see Wyatt Talcott and Curtis Talcott. To the adults, going outside to a real church was like stepping back into the good old days when there were churches all over and too many lights and gasoline was for fueling vehicles instead of torturing things. Adults never miss a chance to relive the good old days or tell kids how great it's going to be when the country gets back on its feet. Is she dazed or drunk or something? Or maybe she's been raped so much she's gone crazy, like that story on the radio. Yeah, good old days. What wonderful religious thoughts they'll be having for a while. I wish we could give her some clothes. Corey and Dad stopped to help an injured woman, and the guys who hurt her tried to jump them. To most of us kids, it was an excuse to go outside the wall. Most of us aren't concerned with religion. I am, but I have a different religion. My brother Keith, he just didn't care. He just wanted to hang out with his friends and pretend to be grown up and dodge work and dodge school and dodge church. He looked around more than anyone as we rode. His ambition is to get out of our neighborhood and go to Los Angeles. He's never too clear about what he'll do there. Just go to the big city and make big money. According to my father, the big city is a carcass covered with maggots. I think he's right. Though not all maggots are in LA. They're here too in Robledo, 20 miles away. According to Dad, it was once a green little city that he'd been eager to abandon in his youth. Eager, like Keith, for big city excitement. That was before Dad's parents were robbed and murdered, before there was a neighborhood wall. Crazy to live without a wall to protect you. Even in Robledo, most of the street poor are desperate or crazy or both. Worse for me. Worse for me, they often have things wrong with them. I tried not to look at them as we rode, but I couldn't help collecting some misery. They cut off one another's limbs, carry untreated diseases. They have no money for water to wash, so even the unwounded have sores. I can take a lot of pain without showing it. I've had to learn to do that. They're all malnourished or poisoned by bad food. But it was hard to keep pedaling when everything I saw made me feel worse and worse.
That's it. So I'm going to thank you for doing that. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Let's see, I'm going to stop share, and I think we're good.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Thank you for sharing your work and for especially using comicology to let us see the beautiful artwork that goes with it. That was really a treat because I haven't seen the Parable adaptation before today.
Oh, well thank you.
So beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah.
you read it wonderfully. I felt like I was tripping over your words, and I was, and I'm so in love with Domo's work. But thank you for that. That's very kind. You're great.
I'm going to start with a question from the pre-submitted so that it will give me some time to look through the chat. And the first one is a pretty broad question, so we can go in a number of different directions. It's for each of you to answer. You can decide which order you want to do. And the question is, what is Afrofuturism and where do you feel that it's going?
Oh man.
Yeah.
No, you don't like that one?
No, it's fine. It's just
cool. It's just we get asked that a lot. So,
I just thought it would set the tone for people joining us.
no, you're absolutely right. We're just being.
I mean, a lot of people I'm sure will already know, but some people might want just a little bit of background.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. You're right.
I guess I feel like I'm old enough to have seen Afrofuturism come around and go around 2 or 3 times and become a movement at least twice. So it began with the scholar and culture critic, his name just went straight out of my head. Who's the guy who, Mark Derry, who was noticing some trends in African diasporic music in particular, but literature as well, in the ways that we talk about the future and about sort of the imaginative life of our cultures. And so he coined the term Afrofuturism to discuss some of those things. I'll start with that. John, do you have anything to add to it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So basically, that piece that Mark Derry wrote, it was a collection of, like I said, it was a collection of interviews, and as Nalo was stating, it's just he was making note of, I guess, the indexes of different types of Afrocentric cultural production methods that were that we have been doing for like a long time, honestly. And then of course you also have people like Alondra Nelson who started looking at this notion of like speculative work. But a lot of Derry's focus was on the African American experience and this kind of like sense of ennui and displacement because of the Middle Passage, because of slave trade. And he talked a lot about the idea of the prosthetic, the notion of like the cyborg prosthetic, in the description, and in some ways it was interesting because it definitely was talking about this kind of metaphorical notion of like what technology was. But the other thing I love about the definition, I don't have it in front of me, but he used the phrase "for lack of a better term" in the definition, which I thought was always interesting because he was like, I see these things happening. I'm interviewing these people. He's really trying to get at the fact that there weren't a lot of like science fiction writers of color or like black science fiction. He talked to the legendary Sammy Delaney in the piece. And so I think since then it's kind of the first time I came across the term, I was dealing with it in like the early 2000s in my own work, and I was really inspired by Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto, and also Frantz Fanon's work, The Fact of Blackness. And I was making these black cyborgs, and someone said, hey, you know what, this looks Afrofuturist. And I was like, you're making up words and I don't understand what you're saying. And then I was like, then I started doing some research and I realized like, yo, this is a cultural production space that was marked by, the birth of the cyber, of cyberspace to a certain degree, right? And I think since then has turned into various strands of Black speculation, from horror to fantasy to what have you. And I think we're probably like in this third iteration, right? Because, and to me, just personally, I'm gonna stop talking, but it's like I feel like it's this generation's like Black arts movement, like because there are a lot of people who are involved in different levels of Black political struggle who are also, thinking about Black futures, and so or Black pasts, because the idea of reimagining and reclaiming the past is also part of it, right? Because you're using Sankofa, right, which is go back and get it. Look at the con term, to go back and get that and push it into the future. Mm-hmm. Because unfortunately, I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're also in the middle of a race-demic, where Black people and Black lives, are suspect. And the idea of a Black future is still a very radical notion, and that's it.
Yeah.
So,
I came to it in part because there's still this notion in the world that African cultural production, African storytelling, when I say African, I mean African diasporic, is sort of can only cope with realism, and it's we either don't have enough imagination or something to imagine anything else. And as somebody who was always reading science fiction, fantasy, and then came to writing it, Afrofuturism makes a space for me. So when I saw that scholar Alondra Nelson was starting a listserv way back when to discuss matters of Afrofuturism, I joined up real fast. And that's where I met people like Aize Jama Everett, people like Juba Kalamka, Alondra herself, just people talking about these ideas and talking about Black imaginative futures and Black imaginative realities.
Thank you. And John, I'm really glad you mentioned your cyborg work. It's such beautiful work, and to me, it's like one of the really innovative moments in the evolution of Afrofuturism. And I'm going to give a shout out to one of your projects too, Nalo, the So Long Been Dreaming anthology, which was, to my knowledge, the first to really think about framing post-colonial responses, so science fiction with a post-colonial perspective as a political move, and as specifically rewriting back to some genre tropes that were in desperate need of unpacking their the colonial underpinnings. So you've both been like such leaders in this field. So I'm going to just mention, because I'm not sure if the library staff are monitoring the chat as well, but apparently some people are having trouble with the sound cutting in and out. So I'll just flag that to more technical people than me to look into, monitoring the chats about the extent of my technical expertise here. And now we will turn to a question from the chat, which is for each of you. And again, I'll leave it up to you to decide who wants to go first. But what is a project of yours that was a favorite to work on, or that's most close to you, and why?
Oh.
I know we're not starting with easy slow ball questions.
No,
I see.
no.
I'm like, what? No.
I liken that question to sort of, if I had children asking me which was my favorite baby, and I wouldn't tell you that either. I think it's always the one that's currently, under my fingers, the one that I'm currently struggling with. That is my most favorite, and that's when I finish it. And while I'm doing it, it's my least favorite. But it's that new book energy, that new story energy, makes it my favorite in the moment. I should go back to that previous comment of yours, Cheryl, about So Long Been Dreaming, and thank you for that, and say that the idea for post-colonial science fiction actually came from another scholar, Upinder Bihan, who co-edited it was his idea to create the anthology, and he approached me, and I said, "What's post-colonialism?" And we had a very long talk. So the initial idea came from him, and the two of us got together and made it happen. But yeah, favorite one to work on. So currently it's House of Whispers, because look what we made.
Okay.
First time writing comics, really, and they put me together with a team of brilliant artists, inkers, colorists, the people doing the covers, the people doing the lettering, and really good editors, and I'm very pleased with it.
And I got to do initial sketches for Uncle Monday.
Yes.
I think that's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, and I got to Tuckerize author Daniel Jose Older shows up twice in the comic.
Oh, that's right, Daniel Jose
So,
Older in the that's
yeah. So he's a DC character now.
so cool.
That's like the highest accolade, being made into a DC character.
Right, it's definitely probably one of them, right? So you know, I'm kind of torn. I think honestly, I've been working with my friend Damian Duffy for like 15 years, right? And you know, he's a wonderful collaborator. He's the co-adapter of, you know, Parable of Sower, and it's his job to actually go through the texts of the amazing Octavia Butler and try to make them into graphic novels. And he does, I think, an extraordinary job, you know. And so I would say, and this is one of the first comics that we did together. There was this thing called Circuit Breaker, years and years. I'm talking about 15 years ago, and I think it's I think it might be my favorite one, because it was the first time I really collaborated with someone, and it really clicked the first time, you know, because it opened up a lot of possibilities, and it made me fall in love with collaboration. And essentially, it was an old story that he had kicking around his head, and we tried it, and we were getting ready to submit it to an art show. And I think, and I forgot what the theme of the art show was, but we turned that story, a 10-page like art comic, a gallery comic, around in a weekend. In a weekend, right? Because we just clicked so well. It's like, this is what I want to do. And I was like, click, 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 click. And I was working digitally. And that was when we knew, it was like, man, we need to do more comics together. You know what I'm saying? And I think not only was it the beginning of a wonderful partnership, we call ourselves J2D2, but it was also the beginning of my craving for like collaboration, you know. And I think that was the first time it really hit me. And I still love that comic too, you know. So many things that would change now, but it was the first thing, and it was successful. People dug it, and it was an art show, you know. So that was really cool. And then anything else I'm working on. So it's like.
Okay, well, the next question, I'm going to combine two of the questions that were pre-submitted to try to get through as many as we can. And these two are somewhat similar. So one was phrased as, what's your dream project? And the other was something you haven't done yet in your career and you look forward to working on as you move forward. So those seem like related questions. And you don't have to choose among your children. You can.
I don't even. Oh, that's hard. Who actually all this hard damn question? I'm sorry.
I'm choosing the hard ones too, but I want to know. So, go.
So what was our favorite? So what's our
dream project or something like a challenge you haven't had yet, and something that you would like to try doing? What's next?
Okay. You first now.
All right, I'm going to be mischief. I am mischief. I'm going to be mischievous. I would like to do the graphic novelization of Samuel R. Delaney's Babel 17.
Oh, look, man, you're trying to get. Okay.
We have an audience of how many hundred here? So I just told it to them. And Chip's work, Delaney's work, has meant so much to me over the years and has literally brought me life in so many ways. And to do something like that, particularly if I could do it with Chip looking over my shoulder, which would not be easy. The man was my mentor and has got, you know, brains for all of us and then some. But that would be my dream project.
And what about the second part?
I forget what the second part
was.
I
mean, you don't have to answer both. I thought they were similar, but if you want to give it a shot, it was something you haven't had a chance to do yet in your career that you would like like to do? Like, I know comics was a thing, and you've done them, so.
And we'll continue doing them,
I
actually.
continue doing them. Is it opera? Is it...
Yes, I would like actually to get some of my, I don't just write, I'm a maker as well of 3D objects. I'd like to start getting some of my work into art shows. Yeah, that's my next thing. In fact, just before lockdown, I had somebody invite me to put something into a group show, and they don't know if that show is going to happen now. So.
Oh, but congratulations! That's wonderful. I've seen a lot of the things you make, and
Yeah.
beautiful, and many of them feature mermaids. So we got a theme going on.
Okay.
So the next question, now I'm going back to the chat, and this is a question I think segues.
That's okay. You don't have to. You can answer. I didn't answer.
I thought you answered. You got more? Go.
No, I didn't answer. No.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have to. I could stop.
I thought you had answered. That was my bad. Okay, go.
No, that's cool. That's cool. No, I was just gonna say, like, I really want to continue working on my Blue Hand Mojo graphic novel series, and I think I have the hankering to either produce or work on a screenplay of some kind, like, to produce something for the screen. Maybe, I don't know, but it seems really crazy. Okay, that's it. Let's go for it.
That's a project I will sign up to see. So
me too. I'm like, I don't know what that
is. Yeah, the things that we really want to do that are dream projects end up being our nightmare projects when we actually have to do them. But there you go.
Yeah.
But then you get to go through that loop that you talked about, Nalo, where it's like your favorite project as soon as you finish it because it's done, but it's your least favorite when you're trying to finish it. So.
Yep.
But UCR has like some pretty good people in theater, film, and production, so I feel that some.
Got to get through all the editing and comics editing I have to do.
All right, and I apologize for jumping ahead in the questions.
No, not at all, not at all.
Okay, so our next one, it's coming from the chat, and it's asking about recommendations for things that successfully integrate Black imagination and politics. And the sort of context for the question is living and working in Riverside, Inland Empire area, and then all the things we've been seeing going on lately. Of course, including Black Lives Matter protests, but also thinking about indigeneity and people in color in America more generally. So how is that influencing your work? And then also what recommendations would you have for work that's taking up those kinds of intersections?
I mean, it's always influencing my work. I'm a Black man in America, and I came up, poor and, and oppressed in a space that I was never supposed to exist in. So, everything that I make is about those experiences, to a certain degree, one way or the other, and unfortunately. But so to me, storytelling is a technology to deal with those. And so yeah, I'm constantly thinking about those. In fact, I always talk to my friend Stacey about this. He always feels that the Black experience in America, the Black artist is kind of trapped by the need to create political work. Even like we can't really sit around and make. It'd be lovely to paint some sunrises, some sunflowers, but they'd be really angry, sunflowers that are fighting against oppression. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, we don't have time to really make things that aren't political, I think. As far as like stuff that I would recommend, I mean, most of the stuff that's like speculative fiction by people of color it seems it's like it is political, right? I mean, I'd recommend our book, I Am Alfonso Jones, by Tony Medina and Stacey and myself, which is it's a Black Lives Matter oriented, graphic novel. What else, Nalo? We got stuff. Rebecca Rowanhouse's work, right?
Yeah. And the work of professors on campus. We're soon to be joined by Andre Carrington, for instance.
Andre Carrington, yeah.
So some of the scholarly work, just mind-blowing. Somebody asked me literally a couple of days ago how my work had changed in the face of COVID-19 and responses to Black Lives Matter. And I don't think it's changing because I'm doing what I always did, which is responding to that kind of thing. I mean, I'm a science fiction writer. Pandemic is in my work. I'm a queer Black woman who's moved to America. So all of these issues are there. I was recently involved in a project started by Black American artists that came out on Juneteenth with a statement of what we would like to see from our institutions, as well as us answering a series of questions about what would Black freedom look like. And I was chagrined at how hard it was to imagine Black freedom. But those 5 statements you can find, they begin with divesting from the police. They begin with hiring more of us. They begin with getting educated. There are 5 very simple demands we are making of all of our institutions. So that's a thing that you can find, refer to, teach from. I feel like I'm so steeped in the work of people working on these very issues. I mean, there's a bunch of us right here on the chat that it's easy to find, for me, to find that work. And if you're affiliated with the UCR, just ask us. Yeah.
I would also say, like, N.K. Jemison's work. I've been loving Far Sector, so good. But also, you know, the Far Sector is a DC comic that is a Black woman who is a former police person who gets fired because she basically was going to, she testifies against her partner who you know, who was using extra force against a Black man, and she ends up becoming a Green Lantern at the edge of the universe. It's so great, the edge of the galaxy. Yeah. But also the city we became, which just came out.
N.K. Jemison.
N.K. Jemison's work, and also Nnedi Okorafor's work, LaGuardia, you know, which is about immigration issues. It's African futurist graphic novel.
Yes.
And also, like I said, the work of Victor Laval, who did this really wonderful, what I call racecraftian horror piece, because it's called The Ballad of Black Tom, and it's like a remix of H.P. Lovecraft's, or a different perspective of his book, or story, The Horror at Red Hook. And I would also recommend his graphic novel Destroyer, which is to a certain degree, dealing with like the Black Lives Matter movement, but through the lens of like Frankenstein. So.
Yeah, and equally so many. I just read an N.K. Jemison short story actually yesterday, and it's only the way I can think of describing it is it's Katrina Punk.
You call it Katrina Punk? Oh, was it
Katrina
the one with the
Punk.
monster?
It's called
Good.
Sinners, Saints, Sinners, and Haints in the City Beneath the Still Waters.
Yes,
Something like that.
Yeah, it's the one where it's like the guy's like stuck on a house. Sorry.
Yes, that one.
I love that story.
I love it.
Sorry.
It's on my syllabus for the fall. I'll find some way to make it relative to
Yeah, exactly. No, seriously. Yeah, but those are just a few, you know, but there's so much. I mean, that's why I feel like, oh my God, where do you start? Everybody's, I mean, you know, we're in the middle of what some people call the Black speculative arts movement, you know, where it's like the notion of like Black speculation and, you know, politics and the fighting for our past and our future through narrative and through different types of critical making is it's afoot, so to speak, you know, not an actual like piece of your body, but like, you know, Sherlock Holmes. So
yeah, and the person asking the question was also asking how it connected to indigeneity, which is very much related, a tangent to what I do. So the work of people like Grace Dillon, who has been collecting stories and films by First Nations artists all around the world and bringing them to the Academy is so vital. Stories like, what's the Clever Man?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I got to meet the director. I fangirled so bad. So Clever Man talking set in Australia, and is talking about Aboriginal ways of knowing, and is science fiction, and also talking about, you know, reserves and people moved into reserves and having to live their lives there. Beautiful, beautiful TV show.
Yeah, and it's so exciting that this question, we could basically take all our time with it because there's so many people creating great work now. And
Yeah.
I was very inspired to see that in addition to the two of you coming up with more and more names, in the chat, people were like adding more names too. So that all the energy is fantastic to see. So we're actually at the end of the time, but I did say I was gonna like announce last question. So are we willing to stay around and do one more question?
It's already done?
We're supposed to do 20 minutes of questions, right? So it's
What?
but if you're willing to stay around, I know the library said we didn't have to work any.
Yeah, Cheryl, it's absolutely, it's only 5:10,
Yeah.
so we have plenty of time left to continue.
So what I was told to do 20 minutes of questioning. So what time should I aim to cut it off?
So let's aim for about 5:20, 5:25.
Okay,
And
fantastic.
then have about a 5-minute wrap up.
Yeah, no, there's many more questions. I just was trying to respect the prior agreement.
No, I think that's awesome. And I was just like shocked. I was like, wait.
Because it's fun. So I am gonna give a shout out. This is not a question, but I did see scroll by me in the chat a super exciting idea. I don't know how much of it was a real proposal or not, but one of the things that scrolled by in the chat was, would either of you be working on or be interested in collaborating on a screenplay adaptation of the Parables books, which I think is something this world urgently needs. So if someone is really in a position to get that project greenlit, I think, yeah.
That would be wonderful, but it's under the purview of the estate.
Yeah.
And honestly, just so you know that the rights to most of Butler's work has already been, people are working on things because like there's a Wild Seed,
of course, yes.
TV show and so all that stuff is in development probably. I don't know. I'm not privy to that. We're just working on the books. So, but that would be wonderful. I want to see it. But
yeah, I definitely want to see it too.
It's not my rodeo, not my steer.
It's a little scary how brilliant Octavia was and how she not only foresaw so much about what we're now living through, but she got the dates like really uncannily.
Yeah.
No, it's terrifying. It's utterly terrifying.
Yeah.
I have to visualize that. Thank you. We still work on
I know. That's and Make America Great Again. She has a president who's. I just noticed while we're doing that while we're talking that Mark Derry, who came up with the concept of Afrofuturism, is here on the chat.
Yep.
Hi, Mark.
Asking us really hard questions. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, no, I don't.
So our next question is actually, we're lucky because a version of it came up in both the chat and in the pre-submitted questions. Slightly different, but I think similar enough that you could answer them together. So one version was sort of asking about teaching. Let me just make sure I'm getting this right. Teaching kindred, teaching kindred, and wondering about any pointers or thoughts you had about teaching the graphic adaptation versus teaching the original novel. And then another similar question came up that just was asking for your thoughts on differences between working in the two media, and so I guess the affordances of both working on graphic works versus working on prose text. So
yeah, that's a lot because I was like, the idea of the affordances is something that definitely, like the formal aspects of how language and pacing and visual aspects of a story are very different in a comic. There's this inherent surreal nature to comics that I think we kind of lean into. Everything in a comic book can be used as a storytelling mechanism, from the borders to the thought balloons to the sound effects. Everything has a particular, the form itself actually is part of the story making, if that makes any sense. Like you have meta panels, it does things. We try to focus on things that prose can't do, as far as, or don't do as well, so to speak, because comics are like this kind of hybrid medium that is like a distant cousin to film and a distant cousin to prose. It's not exactly an illustrated book either. It's this weird amalgam of a lot of different things, and it's a symbol-based language and visual language. So so I would, if you're teaching, for instance, like visual literacy or like media studies or comparative literature, definitely like, you know, reading the book as opposed to how time is different in Kindred is very amazing. For instance, and this is something that we lament all the time, particularly with Kindred, is that you don't know that Dana is African American until like page 33 or something of the original book, right? You don't even know. Like when she figures out that she's time traveling, that's when you realize that she's in a hell of a lot of trouble. At the same time, because he drops the N-bomb, he drops the N-word. You're like, wait, what? She's black? This just became a horror story. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, what? Get the hell up out of there by any means necessary. You know? So that's a very different, you know, you can't do that with comics, because as soon as you meet Dana and Kevin, you know, when they're unpacking their boxes, obviously she's a black woman, right? So we have to, like, that's one aspect of storytelling that is so brilliant. And then, you know, Damien talks about this all the time, like the stakes are so evident, you know, with that, you know, which is pretty awesome. As far, what was the other teaching? So that's about teaching and also making graphic novels are very, very difficult. Do not do this. Do not try this at home. Like, it's so hard. Particularly like long form comics, it's so difficult, you know. And then to have like the weight of Octavia Butler's legacy and her fans on your shoulders is, yeah, it's a lot, you know. We could talk more about that, but I don't want to hog the time. But
And Nalo, do you have some thoughts about this one?
That felt more like a John thing. I have taught the graphic novel of Parable and of Kindred, and in our 10 weeks to put the graphic novel and the novel together, I think could be their own just one course, looking at the differences, because even the little bit I read from Parable, there was a section where there were two narratives happening, both from Lauren, and I was trying to pull them apart to make them more legible. It's easier to do that in prose.
mm-hmm.
The graphic novel form does it in complex ways that key you by how the panels are designed, the shape of the balloons, that kind of thing. Yeah. But to try and translate it into something that's just words was so tough. I mean, I could see it right there on the page. It was easy, but trying to translate it. So it brought me back to what the challenges must have been for the two of you, making the story, adapting the story. Yeah. It's always fun to teach Parable here in Southern California.
It's really odd because
students they get it. They just think
moving, yeah. Because I moved from Buffalo, New York here, and then to actually be in the space where a lot of this happened. I mean, like there's a kid who's from Riverside in Parable of Talents. I keep saying that over again. That's wow, So I was actually able to use the palette of the area and the colors, and kind of, yeah.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. You adopted it while you're in this region, actually. So that's a really nice story.
Beautiful is a word for it. Yeah, it's like,
Well, aesthetically,
thank you.
Artistic achievement.
I appreciate that. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Please never think that I'm not. I'm saying I'm very grateful. But man, that is not nothing happy is happening.
No, of course not.
No, it's bad things. It's definitely it's a warning to us from Octavia Butler. Do not go down this path. Mm-hmm. No. All you gotta do is draw one cannibal child and you're done. That's it. I have to draw a bunch of them. You know what I'm saying? So it's like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, even that line where it's like they chop off each other's limbs, and at first you think, well, why would you do? Oh.
Yeah, you don't want to.
Yeah, and then it's like let's move on.
So I'm gonna give a brief shout out that Andre Carrington, who's soon to be our colleague in our speculative fiction program, is here with us today too. So that's fantastic. And we are now down to what I think is gonna officially be the last question. And I'm glad we were able to have more time. And it's a question that's coming from Mark Derry, actually. So I feel like I'm in this moment of science fiction history here. And it's asking if you have any thoughts on Afro Surrealism versus Afro
That,
Pessimism.
that question.
You
Man.
know, we're gonna wrap this up with some light, easy lifting here. So
We are so not, and you're being so sarcastic.
I think the thing is that the terms are always going to be the reality of what they're trying to point at is always going to be bigger than the terms themselves. I mean, even in straight up science fiction community, we're still arguing over science fiction, fantasy, speculative fiction. What do the terms mean?
Right.
Blah, 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 blah. So for me, as someone who tends to move towards fantasy, I write science fiction as well. Using the term Afrofuturism, I think it does have room for me in it, but when you look at the actual word futurism in there, it doesn't necessarily seem to point to my work. So I'm always doing that straddling of the difference, the gap in signifier you're always going to have between the term and what it's pointing at. I don't have any concrete thoughts about that, except I think that gap is a productive one.
So as far as like, it's difficult for me to, okay, Afro Surrealism, you know, which was originally coined by, I want to say, Amiri Baraka when he was writing about Henry Dumas's work, you know, but he called him an Afro Surrealist expressionist. And I want to say that D. Scott Miller's work around Afro Surrealism actually helped kind of define a lot of that. And if you look at some of the extrapolations of like Afro Surrealism, some of it actually does map very easily onto how we're looking at, you know, what some people call Afrofuturism 2.0, what have you. But Nalo's absolutely right. There's different like formal qualities that actually kind of, you know, bounce off of each other. I mean, even like the crime writer Chester Himes said that Black experience is surreal. You know, I'm paraphrasing, of course. It's like he said something like, you know, black life is so strange to the point where it's just surreal, you know. And so the idea is like trying to take the idea of the strangeness of Black identity and merging it with the now, you know what I'm saying? And actually through so is talking about just the radical difference between what it means to be Black in America and something else, right? As far as like Afro Pessimism goes, I think some of my work does dip its toe into Afro Pessimism, some of the what I call the ethnographic or the darker aspects of the work that I work on. I think for me though, I think more about catharsis, you know, as far as like how like the horrors and the pessimistic attitudes about what it means to be under colonial space, in a colonial space or in an oppressive space. I want to try to get past those things and get to the Afrofuture. I think about Afrofuture as a destination and not necessarily a, you know, designations of, you know, the semantics about what it is. I think everybody who's working on these speculative projects are thinking about, you know, reclaiming Black pasts and looking at Black futures. You know, I think that we all have that in common. And it's, you know, and we can argue about it, and we're going to, that's what we do in the academy. We make up words and we define and we argue about them. That's our job, you know. But at the end of the day, Afro Surrealists, I think, you know, ethnogothic folk, Black horror, whatever, the speculative, we're trying to speculate a better space for us, you know, because again, we're trying to get past this moment one way or the other, you know. Yeah, and I think those are some of the things about my work definitely intersects with darker subjects a lot of times, but you know, I got a little piece of the Afrofuture now. He's 1 years old, and I can't afford to be pessimistic anymore. I think as an instructor that, you know, in our little grab bag about, you know, along with like theory and all these different things we work through in the classroom, we have to have hope. You know, without hope, we might as well just go and jump off a really tall building, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, I can't get down with being pessimistic about the work, because as long as I have life, then there's hope, right?
Yeah, I think the danger is in confusing pessimism with realism. Because sure, we're pessimists. Look at what we're trying to survive through.
Look what we have wrought.
And what has been wrought upon us. But yeah, there's got to be some way to move up, to keep that, to move along with it, to not deny its existence, but to look through and beyond and with it all at the same time.
So those are like two fabulous answers to a really difficult question. So thank you both so much.
Man, I think I botched my answer totally, and Derry's going to be judging me forever. Thank you. Anyway.
I'm going to end on an actual light question though, because I think this one will be a quick answer, I hope. And as John, you've convinced me the need to like keep hope as part of the grab bag here. So
yeah, trying to, man. You know, I'm working on it. You know, so like
the daily meditation. This is a question that came from the pre-submitted ones, and it is: if you could take one science fiction book to a desert island, which would it be?
Oh man, that is not hopeful. That first of all, why am I on a desert island? You know.
That's how science fiction people think. Actually, it's not like what book am I reading?
I'm like, why would I be there?
Yeah.
Listen, I am congenitally unable to choose between two alternatives. I always want at least four.
Are my family okay? Are they okay? Do we have an accident? I'm right. I'm like, what is going on?
But I always have an answer to which book, and it's Dahlgren by Samuel R. Delaney.
That's like 5 books, though.
Yeah, see?
That's not fair.
And obviously, because of the way science fiction brains work, instead of this being a question to end on, it's a premise for the next thing. Why are you on the island?
I know, it's right. So now I'm thinking like, well, I'm writing a whole like, that's a science fiction anthology. I don't know what sci-fi. Oh man, that's a good question.
Oh, it could be an anthology.
Who's on the island? How'd they get there? What are they reading? Yeah.
Maybe you know what? Maybe something. Oh man, that's a good question. I don't know, man. I'm thinking something like, you know, Faces at the Bottom of the Well, or like The Invisible Man, you know, something like that. Because you know, race is science fiction, right? It's not real, you know. So I've been kind of wrestling with the idea that, you know, writing about race is like writing about like, you know, about all different types of sci-fi things, because it's a construct, it's not really real, and then we actually create these narratives about it. So that I just made the question more difficult. I'm failing at this. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Do the anthology now. You got to do the anthology. That's
No, I already have like no.
I have some thoughts.
No, you don't have any. No, don't say any. Oh man.
Well, now I'm gonna pass things back over to Sherry. So you don't have to commit right this moment.
All right, thank you. This was fantastic, and what a great way to end. So it's been such an honor to share this space with you, and to also have everybody who joined us. And we really appreciate you taking your time, and you've been such a great audience. This chat thing is just hot, you know, it's just zipping by. So I also want to say that we want to welcome you again, in case you didn't get enough of us, for our next session in this series, which will be held August 6th. And it will feature Dr. Clifford Trafser reading from his latest book, Fighting Invisible Enemies, Health and Medical Transitions Among Southern California Indians, published by the University of Oklahoma Press in 2019. And there's still more. That session will be followed by a presentation on October 8th, highlighting the work of Professor Stuart Krieger, entitled What If? Professor Stuart Krieger and Professor Erith Jaffe-Berg discuss Krieger's counterfactual history novel, That One Cigarette. So more information about these events and invitations will be forthcoming. And thank you all so much, John, Nalo, Cheryl.
It was amazing.
My pleasure.
So
yes,
it was
thank
a great
you.
pleasure.
And
Go safely.
Anyway, so thank you.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.